Two things about this Labour manifesto really. The first is that it's an 11th hour, almost a minute to midnight grab for the mantle of party of fiscal responsibility. So there's a commitment that every policy is paid for, that there'll be no additional borrowing, and the manifesto even writes the first line of the Labour budget, which is that this budget cuts the deficit in every year. The second thing is that this manifesto is really Miliband unbound, so it contains all the things you've come to expect from Ed Miliband's Labour Party, taking on the vested interests like the banks and the energy companies that they say are holding working people back and stopping Britain from succeeding. There's a retail offer here too, a higher minimum wage, the NHS restored to strength, free childcare, an end to zero-hour contracts. We've got about 3 weeks before we find out whether the people buy it.
So what we've seen with the Conservative Party manifesto is the ambition to reward those in the workplace, to look after those in education, and to reaffirm the party's commitment to the NHS. Now, with a pledge of £8 billion to the NHS, the offer of 30 hours of free childcare to working parents of 3 to 4-year-olds, and the promise of a higher minimum wage that's also income tax free, we're seeing a real indication of where we are in the polls at the moment and the decision by the Conservatives to opt for electoral goodies. We've also seen a real response to the criticisms that the Conservative campaign has been far too negative. David Cameron has been considerably more optimistic in his rhetoric, and his manifesto speech really did show that. And the Prime Minister will be hoping that he's done enough. Last week's pitch for the manifesto has done enough to ensure that he returns to government and that he gives himself the advantage in the polls to ensure that his party is in power post May the 7th.
So the Liberal Democrats obviously have a very tough hand to play in this election, and at the moment they're running a very disciplined and tight campaign. And obviously the manifesto launch was seen as going very well and was very well received as part of that. The document itself is very policy heavy, as you'd expect from the Liberal Democrats, at 159 pages. But this is a very different document to previous years. It's a document for continued involvement in government, not in opposition. And the 5 policy red lines that are on the front cover of the document won't cause any problems for any of the potential coalition partners. So, in fact, the 2 policy areas are part of the Conservative manifesto as well. However, I think in the detail of the document there are a couple of areas which might cause problems. The most obvious is the commitment to oppose an EU referendum, which will create difficulties for any future coalition with the Conservatives. And secondly, for both the Labour and Conservative Party, the opposition to any airport expansion in the South East will be a problem that will have to be resolved in the weeks of coalition negotiation after the election. However, ultimately, in the immediate term, it will be for the electorate to decide if they want a future Lib Dem involvement in a government, and then it will be for the coalition parties to work out the details in the months, in the weeks and hopefully not months after May.